Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everyone. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri lisani yafqahu qawli amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah, praise to Almighty Allah that we are gathered for this approximately about 30 minutes talk about introduction to Halal. So to this morning, I'll be talking about halal food. What is halal food? But before we go into the details, first I would like to share about why do we need to eat halal food. In the Quran, there are so many verses in the Quran stating the importance of why we need to eat halal food. For instance, is this Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 168, where Allah SWT mentioned here, Ya ayuhannas, oh mankind, eat from whatever is on earth that is lawful and wholesome, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Indeed, he is to you a clear enemy. Here is clearly say why we need to eat halal food, and it is a directive from Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala to eat only halal. But the interesting part here, where Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala said about halalan tayyiban. What it means is halal, lawful, and tayyib or tayyiban, wholesome. Later in my slides, I will briefly talk about wholesomeness or tayyiban. The next ayat is also Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 172. Here, Allah SWT says, "Oh, you have believed, eat from good things." Halal and tayyiban. Again, in this surah, Allah mentioned about halal and tayyiban, all good things which we have provided you, that and be grateful to Allah if it is indeed Him that you worship. Here, Allah specifically mentioned about halal and tayyib, and also Allah relate this ayat to being grateful to Allah, that we only worship to Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. Just very brief about why we need to eat halal food. Well, if we go to Al-Quran, the verse Surah Al-Araf, verse 19, and I think in several other surah also mentioned the same thing, where Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala mentioned to Adam, Prophet Adam, here in the verse 19 here, "And O Adam, dwell you and your wife in paradise, and eat from wherever you will, but do not approach this tree, lest you will be among the wrongdoers." The one thing that we can understand here is that here indeed it is a test for Prophet Adam, but again beyond those understanding is that this is the first directive, or directive by Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala not to do something, but in this case is not to eat a food. So it is a part of our belief that food, there are food that can be eaten or halal, in other words, and there are food that cannot be eaten, or in other words is haram. So that's a question. So what is halal food? Of course there are so many interpretations, but I would like to do, or I would like to refer to this Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 4. Well, the the meaning of this ayah is that they ask the O Muhammad what is made lawful for them. Say all good things are made lawful for you, and the rest is about Allah explain about the birds of prey and so on. But again, the first phrase of this ayat which I want to emphasize is that you know when we talk about halal food, in essence we are talking about you know food that is good for us, good that gives us benefit, food that is nice to eat, food that is tasty. So basically, in talking about halal food, it should be about concentrating on what we can eat rather what we cannot eat. So in another surah, surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 3. Here, Allah specifically mentioned about those food which is haram. And the second part of this surah is about, um, you know, um, where a situation become forceful, there is a waiver in terms of the food. But let me explain the first part of this ayah. Now, for this first part of ayat where Allah specifically mentioned that prohibited to you are dead animals, then blood, flesh of swine or pig or pork, and that which has been dedicated to other than Allah, meaning to say, animals or other food that is being offered as a symbol for worship, other than Allah. That is forbidden, or in other words, that is haram. And those animals killed by strangling or by violent blow or by a headlong fall or by the goring of horns. What it means is that if there are animals which being strangled or being killed not as according to the Islamic rites, or those animals who has been bitten or being eaten by other animals, except what you are able to slaughter before its death, and those which are sacrificed on stone altars. What it means is that all animals, all land animals, those animals which are permissible to eat, for instance, like cow, chicken, buffalo, birds, and so on, you know, we need to slaughter by the name of Allah before it died. Meaning to say that, because if the animal died, then it is not possible to slaughter. And because the cause of death is not because of slaughter and not by saying or mentioning the name of Allah, then it becomes forbidden. And the last part of this ayat, and prohibited that you seek decision through divine arrows. This is a grave disobedience. This day, those who disbelieve have despaired of your religion. So fear them fear them not, but fear me. This day I have perfected your religion and completed my favor upon you and have approved for Islam as a religion. The second part of this ayat is mentioning about our religion, but our religion and only fear to Allah, and Islam is the only religion that Allah's favor. And the last part of this ayat is very, very important also to us. Although, for instance, like pork is haram, but again, the last ayat, but whoever is forced by severe hunger with no inclination to sin, then indeed Allah is forgiving and merciful. What it means here is that in terms of a specific condition, in terms of what we call as darura, or what we call as um, in this ayat it calls severe hunger. For instance, there is a situation where we are there's no food around us, and the only food that we have around us is only pork or pork based ingredient. And if we don't eat those kind of food, we might die. So, in this very specific situation, and Allah give us, give us the space to eat something, you know, from this source. But again, we can't eat, beyond normal. What I'm trying to say, just eat a few, just enough to fill our stomach, and just for the survival. So basically, the beauty of Islam is that although Allah in the first place mentioning about, the categories of food which is haram, but again, if the situations where, in the situation of life and death, as I mentioned just now, if we don't eat, we go to, we might die. And around us there's only halal, sorry, there's only pork based food, and there's none other food. If we don't eat, we will die. So in that specific situation, Allah is forgiving and merciful. Allah permits, but only, a small portion, just enough for us to survive, until we get another halal food. So in terms of concept, what does halal means? We have looked into the Quran just now. So basically, halal is an Arabic word, means lawful or permitted. So what it means again is that it is lawful, permitted by Allah. Haram, which means unlawful or prohibited by Allah. Now, when we talk about halal and haram, one basic understanding we need to remember, only Allah can decide what is haram, what is halal. Now, our duty is to follow. If we don't understand, then we refer to those people who are have more understanding than us. And even those people, they cannot say, this is halal, this is haram, without referring to the Quran, without referring to the hadith. So whatever we say halal and haram, it must be referred to Quran, it must be referred to hadith. Well, halal and haram, that's another situation where, what I call as gray areas. This, in terms of modern food processing, food ingredients, there are, there are areas, gray areas. In Arabic we call it masbuh. But again, these are the main focus in terms when we talk about halal and haram. So basically, there are ingredients that it is not easily to understand. If even we read the what you call the labels, we have doubt, is the source of the ingredients, is it halal, is it haram, does it come from a halal base, or it is come from haram base. Now, very briefly, I would like to share with you the concept of halal and haram in food. So basically, there are a lot more of halal food rather than haram food. So in essence, all pure and clean things are considered halal except for the following. Number one, swine or pork and its byproduct. So anything derived from pork, either the flesh itself, the meat itself, or its byproduct. For instance, like, I have a one slide specifically to talk about byproducts from pork. But again, for instance, like emulsifier. So what is emulsifier? Emulsifier is a food ingredient which binds the oil and the water part, so that it can be bind. For instance, like our ice cream, like our mayonnaise, there are this food ingredient called emulsifier, so that we have a good consistency or a good texture, so that the mayonnaise doesn't separate to two components, and also our ice cream will not separate into two components. So the emulsification there can be derived, the source can be derived from animal and can be derived from plant. Okay, so animals improperly slaughtered or dead before slaughtering. If we have, for instance, like cows, so it needs to be slaughtered properly. It needs to slaughter with the name of Allah. And if the animal died not because of the name of Allah, or not because of slaughtering, then it is haram to consume those meat. One might ask me, just a situation, what if a car hits a chicken and the chicken die? In essence, the chicken is permissible meat to eat, but again, because of the chicken died, uh, because of being hit by a car and it died, so it is not halal for us to consume those meat. For instance, animals killed in the name of anyone than Allah. This is what I mentioned just now. And anything, animals or plants or fruits that being offered to other gods, or for other religious purposes, then it is not permissible. It is haram, to consume those kinds of animals. Of course, alcohol and intoxicants, any alcohols, any intoxicants, beer, whiskey, spirits, they are all haram. I want to stress one point over here. You know, in terms of marketing, nowadays we can hear about 0% beer or 0% wine. Even there are marketing saying halal beer or halal whiskey, but in essence, there's no such thing as halal beers, halal whiskey, because if you say that 0% alcohol in a beer, then by definition of an alcoholic drink, it is not a beer. So in terms of other spirits or other alcoholic drinks, is the same thing. If you call it halal wine, what does halal wine? Wine, the definition of wine itself, mention about certain percentage of alcohol. So if you take out the alcohol from the wine, then the product actually is not a wine. It calls something else. So perhaps it's a juice, for instance. So um, in terms of our religion, from Islam point of view, um, wine is wine, it is haram. Beer is haram, and any alcoholic drinks is haram. So let's separate those things, and not to to follow this marketing gimmick. Then carnivorous animals, birds of prey, land animals without external ears. This is specifically mentioned. For instance, like hawk, which is a bird, but it's another prey. The becomes a prey, eat another animals, or animals with fangs. Like tigers or bears. So those category of animal, it is forbidden to eat. Blood and blood byproducts. Well, the reason being why Muslim is not or it's haram for Muslim to eat blood, because blood is a very good medium for bacteria to grow. It is also a very good media for virus to grow. So if we eat blood, if we consume blood, what it means is that we eat directly the virus and the bacteria, which can harm our body. And in Islam, harming one's own body is haram, because even our own body is entrusted by Allah SWT to take care of our body really good. And inshallah, during akhirat, in front of Allah, we can answer to Allah that we have protect, or we have take care our body as good as we can. And when we see Allah in the next life, we can say it. So one of the thing that we need to take care is our diets, what we eat. So coming back to the blood and blood byproducts, so there are cuisines in this world which they use blood as part of the food ingredient. So we need to be very careful on those ingredients. The next is foods contaminated with any of the above products, meaning to say, even if, for instance, like pasta, pasta, the what do you call that? Um, um, what do you call that? Part of the ingredients they use white wine, the gravy, right? You have the pasta, then you have the gravy. So in order to make the gravy, sometimes they will either add white wine or red wine. So if there are red wine, although pasta is basically is halal because it is made from plant, it is made from dough. But again, when we add any haram materials, then the food becomes non-halal anymore. Why? Because for instance, like the wine is najis or it's impure. So when we mix a pure and impure material, it is not permissible for us to do that, right? So there's one, if we can remember, I know the above phrases or the above ayat where I mentioned about halalan and toiban. Every verse there's the word, the directive by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, halal and toiban. So in a very surface manner, halal is by sharia, and toiban, wholesomeness, it's basically about our daily life. So a food must be halal and toiban. Why? Number one, okay, what toiban means is wholesomeness. Why we need to be wholesomeness? Because number one, the food that we eat must be healthy, must be nutritious. So when we eat, our body can take the vitamins, can take the mineral, so that we can have the energy to go to work, we can have the energy to study, we can have the energy to do our prayer, we can have the energy to help other people. So it is important to get good food, healthy and nutritious food, in other words, and that are the added value to human consumption. And when we talk about toiban, also we talk about quality, meaning to say that it is not just about the vitamins, the minerals, the good thing, but also in terms of taste. The food we eat must taste nice. The food that we eat must look nice. The food that we eat must be always give us that a good feeling. And another thing about toiban is about, we prepare the food, it must be safe, it must be hygienic. When we consume the food, the food should not give us food poisoning, the food should not pose any harm, and more importantly, the food that we prepare and give someone else, there's no food adulteration. What it means is that we don't add substandard food to another food. The food we give to other people to eat, the food that even for us to eat, must be good, healthy, quality, hygiene, and safe. Right. So, halal food. Living in Japan, I do understand that they create a bit of difficulties to find halal food. So it will create, a kind of dilemma among the Muslims consumers, because we sometimes, we don't understand the source of the ingredient, the source of how the people make. And there are restaurants, saying serve no pork. Some parts of the world have that. And when we go out and dine, or even we buy our food, we need to understand the status of meat, our chicken, our beef, our lamb. And if we don't have any labels, if we don't understand where we buy, and we don't understand if the meat halal or not, so it's going to be difficult on Muslim consumers. The most challenging part is the food ingredients and additive, because in the food labelings, when it says emulsifier, so when it say, for instance, when it says emulsifier, so there's a big question: does this emulsifier origins from animal, or it is just origins from plant? So if it's stated clearly in the food labeling, then we can go and another step further. But if it's not, then it becomes a dilemma to us, because emulsifier can be derived from either one. And also, for instance, like the mix of alcohol in our chocolates or in our ice creams. So we need to understand really the food ingredients, where the big challenge in the modern food processing. Right. Let me just say something about this slide. Um, well, this is an example of haram material. So if I take one example on this on the slide, human body. Now, for instance, our hair. Our hair is basically we have some protein. If we are looking into the building blocks of the protein, we can find what we call as L-cysteine. The one is in the yellow box. Now, in L-cysteine is one of the ingredient that can be used in terms of enhancing a flavor. We can use L-cysteine to do seasoning in our food, and also we can use as bread improver. So if in the label says L-cysteine, and if in the labeling doesn't provide you more information, if in the labeling doesn't have any halal logo, then it will cause a dilemma. So what to do with this? All right. Well, if we want to understand further, then as a consumer, I think the next best thing is that uh, you know don't buy it, because in Islam, something that is doubtful, we better leave. But again, the next best, and the second step we need to do, we can always check with the producer and ask the producer, the L-cysteine that you have in the ingredient, is it, comes from a human hair or not? Then we have some blood, I have mentioned just now, and again, in terms of carrion, meaning to say dead animals, of course, that we can meet, all sorts of food ingredients. Pig, I have a different slide after this. Khamar, basically alcoholic drinks. So we do understand alcoholic drinks can be cocktail, wine for cooking, and whatnot. These are all, byproduct of these materials. Okay, now I'm in, I think, in my one or two, three slides, my last two, three slides. Now, because of this, of pig, there's one. If you have time, please Google out this. Um, if you can read on my slide. It says here pig 05049. If you go to YouTube, you just Google pig 05049. There is a whole story about how this researcher, she went to go to extent to understand each part of this pig. She wanted to see if there is any part of this pig being thrown out, and she concluded there are more than hundreds or even thousands of product based from one pig. Because of this short time, I can't dwell on that. I can't explain further. But again, from this article, you can see from food, makeups, photographic film, soap, washing powder, paint, crayons, shoes, toothpaste. So the variety of products made from only one pig, so many. So again, that will create a lot of dilemma towards us as Muslim. If it's fresh meat of pig, it's easy to tell, but again, when it becomes food ingredient, that is where the challenge is. So that was my slide and my last slide. So thank you very much, arigatou gozaimasu, to everyone. Inshallah, if we have another longer time, another place and a platform, inshallah, I can join with you and tell the second part of this halal food. Thank you, arigatou gozaimasu. Inshallah, we will meet again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. End streaming.